We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Welcome again to another episode of Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. I want to welcome today a special guest, Kris Hutson from Dream City Schools, two locations, one in Scottsdale, one in Glendale, in the broader Phoenix market. Welcome, Kris.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm very excited for the day, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Kris, let's introduce you to our audience. Tell us a little bit about your background, your family, your education, and your career.
Well, I grew up in East Texas, went to University of Texas at Tyler for a Bachelor of Fine Arts, moved to Arizona, and for my master's degree in music, I was a band director for 25 years before I went into administration. So I did the orchestra, beginning guitar, marching band, jazz band. We did it all, trips all over the place. So it was a wonderful time. My wife is also a band director, and we were celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. I have two great kids and three wonderful grandchildren, two in Thousand Oaks, California, or Agora Hills, and one in Nashville.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so your career as a band director led naturally to becoming the superintendent of a Christian school, I guess. How did that happen?
Oh, I was heavily involved in our church, which was formerly Phoenix First Assembly, changed to Dream City, and have a phenomenal music program. And my wife and I became involved in the orchestra there. And I wound up for a short time, about 6 years, working as assistant music minister at that church. And an acquisition occurred, and we actually wound up with this school. And I had gone into administration and very close ties to the church, and they asked me if I wanted to run, take over as superintendent or head of school here. And so I'm starting my third year here at Dream City.
So the school was in existence and the church took it over?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. We were, yeah.
How long ago? That was about 3 years ago?
No, 6 years ago. We took over 6 years ago, and then I came on board 2.5 years.
Well, I assume then the school was renamed to be named consistent with the church. That answers
Correct.
part of the question. Where's the term Dream City come from? I Googled it before getting on, and I didn't see it uniquely attached to Phoenix.
No,
I didn't think it was. I'm curious.
Well, the name of the church was Phoenix First, and the dream of our pastor is to have multiple campuses throughout Arizona. And so you don't want to have a Phoenix First in another town.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, a more broad name to encompass, because now we have two campuses in California. We have a campus in Oklahoma. So we're expanding out. We have like 10 different campuses throughout.
Okay, very well. Now, Dream City School is what I would typically call a traditional Christian school, a member of the Association of Christian Schools International,
yep,
and not a classical Christian school.
That is correct.
Okay.
We 3 years ago, when I came on, we formed an alliance with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA.
Okay.
And in that, there was a dream forged between our pastor, Luke Barnett, and Charlie to form a Christian affiliation that aligns to ideologies of what Turning Point represents. So we actually became the first Turning Point Academy. They moved to a classical format with the 5 C's. And I just say we're 4 out of the 5.
Okay. Now, what is
so
that?
We're an affiliate with that.
Yeah, go ahead and give us the 5 C's and tell us which 4. I'm used to hearing that when people talk about Calvinism, they call themselves 4-point Calvinists instead of 5, but I don't know it. I got to have this reminder and then tell me which one you're not.
Well, I should have known that you were going to ask me that question. So here we go. 5 C's are, oh my goodness, you're going to kill me here because I'm on the spot here, and I'm afraid I'm going to miss one. Let me find it. I'm going to find it. So if you're going to
take a minute.
do this thing, I want to do it right because I usually get 3 out of the 5. And hang on a second. Okay, here we go. A classical Turning Point 5C school is Christian, classical, conservative, collaborative, and cost affordable.
Okay.
So we are cost affordable. I don't know if you know, Arizona has 2 wonderful ways that you can fund private education: the new ESA program, which is like a voucher program, and the student tax organization, the STO. So I would say 85% of our students are on some type of scholarship with those two forms. So we're a very middle class private school, which is awesome, making it affordable to everyone. So we're Christian conservative. We're very conservative. Pastor gave a sermon a couple of years ago that said it's time to draw the line in the sand. We have to stand up and believe what we're going to believe. And the whole coexist thing is not working in America, and they've tried that for a while. And so we stand very firm, very conservative. Yeah. So
which of the 5 you're not? Well, you're not specifically of the 5 is the classical one.
correct. We're not classical.
Yep. Okay, good. Now somebody might say, well, why are we talking about that on a classical education podcast? And the answer I'll give for you is because you have an interest in bringing classical elements into your traditional Christian school.
That is absolutely correct.
Wonderful. Well, before we pursue that, I think I've said this on this podcast before, but I'll say it again here. And it's this: I've often said, I wish if ever ACSI folks ask me to speak at one of their conferences on what elements would be best to consider from classical education into a traditional Christian school, I would love to answer that question. But today, I want to hear where your thinking is on that.
For me, we just went to the Turning Point Educator Summit in West Palm Beach 2 weeks ago. And I think Jennifer Burns, who's been on your podcast before, I believe, mentioned that we are about not information, but formation. And I am really an advocate of not just spouting out facts and having the kids regurgitate. I am really concerned about the current population of students not being able to think and reason for themselves. So the rhetoric debate classes, the Socratic method, the reasoning, small groups, asking why, throwing out questions and have them determine and not giving them the answers. The youth of today are so into their phones, and I believe COVID has really negatively impacted that made them even more inward, that we don't have leaders that are graduating. They're exactly what the plan is to have a bunch of people out there that can just follow the lead of the government. And we are not about that. I want independent thinkers when we graduate. And I think that should be the goal of every Christian school, whether they're classical or not. So how do we get kids to think for themselves? Classical training, Socratic method, asking why, help them to come out of their shell, help them learn how to speak in public. Yeah. Those basic things I think are critical for youth of today.
Yeah. One of the phrases that we hear often is teaching critical thinking, which sounds to me like that would be a good summary of what you're saying there. Is that fair?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The higher level of Bloom's taxonomy is definitely where we're going. Analytical, creative, collaborative. Yeah.
So I'm curious what you think the key elements are. You mentioned asking why, you mentioned Socratic method, but it seems to me there's something very significant missing. And so I'm curious what you think the critical elements are to teach students to be critical thinkers.
You're asking me what do I think is critical for that?
Yeah.
Right now, my observation is that let's give you information and let's put it back on the test. Let's do standardized testing to just check the boxes, make the score, move on to the next thing. And when you ask well, I came out of retirement for this job. and
Good for
what
you.
I'm really is my passion in this is that when students leave this place and they move on to wherever they go, whether it's the workplace, whether it's armed services, whether it's college, whatever career path they choose, that when they go and meet this with the left, that they will be able to not just know, well, I believe this, I believe in this and this and this, whatever that is, that the worldview is biblical, and that they can not only say what they can say why they believe it, they can defend why they believe it, and they can also defend and tear down in argument the other worldviews that are not in line with biblical worldview. That to me is just critical for that.
Yeah, it is critical for that. And there was a bit of a rhetorical aspect in the question, so I'm going to be a little bit more direct here. Where does the teaching of formal and informal logic as a discipline, or even as part of other disciplines, fall into your thinking then? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I need to establish the foundation. Well, let's back up. And that being here, traditional teachers, this is a new concept for the teachers as well.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, so it's training for them as well. It's baby steps for us to get to this place. So yes, logic is critical. The philosophers of that Socrates and Aristotle and how they approach logic and the questioning system they have. So it's a slow process to get to that place.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that you're trying to avoid a major disruption to program.
Right.
At the same time, one of the things I've said, I bet I've said it more than 100 times in public speaking, and that is that I didn't understand this in my own education. I didn't understand this as an adult until I became more familiar with the precepts, so to speak, of classical Christian education. But you've heard it said, we just don't teach kids how to think anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that is virtually synonymous with saying we don't teach formal and informal logic.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so the idea of teaching critical thinking has as a foundational element in my thinking that we teach the discipline, the subject of formal logic, the subject
right.
of formal logic. What's fascinating to me, there was a biography or an autobiography, I'm not sure, of Steve Martin, the comedian, and I don't know how it helped his career, but in his young adult life, he was fascinated to study logic. I'm not sure why I said that, other than I just thought it was interesting to learn, because I don't know how it plays out for him.
And I think in the traditional Christian school, as we're labeled, that can move down into the elementary. And I don't think people really understand that you can start teaching these concepts very, very young. That it's not for a teenager to understand logic and to figure out this. So getting that down at those elementary rudimentary grades to where they can answer why themselves, and they can logically come to a conclusion. That's critical as well.
Yeah, well, that's true. And in our pedagogy, we think of this stage of the logic stage as a place where we teach formal and informal logic, and it doesn't fall down into the grammar school years. But just like teaching the facts of a subject, when the subject is a more sophisticated subject, like say economics, we don't teach economics facts much in grammar school. That would be a course that we would take later in life, maybe
right.
high school. And so there are elements of things in logic that might fall into grammar school, but the whole concept, the discipline itself, taking it as a full subject,
right,
would be tough to do at earlier years, just like it would,
well, yeah, I understand,
or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So and trying to fit in, and again, we're strapped to the structure that we have moved into. So it's okay, where can you insert this? Where can you insert this? And what's required from our perspective, what should be required? Well, all this should be required, but there's no room for it to be required because of the structure. So we're trying to incorporate those concepts into current classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you think, what classes then would lend themselves best and most to the critical thinking and principles of formal and informal logic?
Well, I mean, Bible class, our theology classes are great for that.
Yeah.
Throwing the different worldviews out there, throwing the different philosophers out there, and help them to reason, what is right about this, wrong about that, absolute truth versus relativism, all of those. That's a wonderful field, place to make that happen. History. I love the history concepts, and why our government, why does our republic and our form of government work versus other form. So it's everywhere. You can put it everywhere, but those are the two that come to mind the most.
Yeah, what you're referring to there when you think of history, I suppose, is cause and effect.
Right.
Yeah.
And why this is the greatest experiment, the great experiment, the republic, the three forms of government, so versus what has happened in history. So
yeah, one of the great 20th century theologians, R.C. Sproul, we've been involved with in a number of different ways, used to say, I think I've said this on Vox before, that he believes the greatest problems we have with theological understanding are problems of logic. And so for you to mention classes about the scriptures in your first instance is really it resonates with how its importance in understanding and being able to think logically and clearly about the scripture.
Yeah, definitely. It's great.
So how, as you think in terms of taking classical elements, you're talking about critical thinking. You mentioned, I think you mentioned rhetoric and being able to communicate well too. How does that factor into your thinking?
Well, again, I would refer back to today's youth and their addiction to the phone.
Nice grandkid out there, by the way.
That they would be sitting next to someone and rather text them than talk to them. and even in walking on campuses, especially prior to being here, they won't even look at you, and they speak, and you ask them a question and they're almost dumbfounded, on how to respond. And so the rhetoric and debate, we've made that a requirement for freshman year here. So every kid has to take that their freshman year, because we want them to be able to just get used to speaking out loud again to people. And then, oh my word, give your opinion. Someone might not like my opinion, and so to get them that confidence of saying and understanding and thinking as to what they're about to say and responding well, even yes ma'am, no ma'am, talking to instructors, they come in out of the room, those type of everyday things that you and I, it was just taken for granted growing up. These current students have to be taught how to do that.
Yeah. It's been interesting for us as we have students in certain countries, that different cultures, a number of Asian cultures tend to be more deferential as students. They don't want to speak their opinion. They're used to just absorbing. And it's been a challenge for us in our online school, where we have lots of international students, to get them to see the importance of interacting in a conversation and not just being a sponge soaking things up, but that they're learning involves conversation and interaction and mutual challenge in those conversations. I couldn't agree more. It is a very important aspect that students learn the value of quality communication.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And writing. I don't think They write in emojis and anonyms or synonyms. They just don't write real words in complete sentences either, you know. So the whole grammar, the fundamental in language, getting the grammar and understanding all those concepts.
Well, see,
It's
here's what
critical.
I'm hearing. I'm hearing they need to master language. That's why we teach Latin, one of the reasons. They need to be able to think clearly. That's why we teach logic. They need to be able to speak articulately and persuasively and look people in the eye and do those things and communicate effectively. That's why we teach rhetoric. Now we have the three pillars of content in a classical education. Maybe this is a difficult question, but why not go all the way then?
We just might eventually.
Okay. Well, we got you on the record now.
A spoonful here and a spoonful there, and move them. It's a buy-in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a buy-in. Again,
Yeah.
We're also trying to educate parents, because again, even though we're Christian parents, and we still all grew up, most of us, dropping your kids off, letting the school do their thing, picking them up and going home, and bringing the parents into this buy-in that you're just as responsible as I am for the education of your child.
Yeah.
And that is not how we grew up.
Yeah.
It's a foreign. So bringing them into this and helping them understand, okay, biblical worldview is critical for your child. You have to, that is absolute truth. And that's where we start with everything. And so getting them in on that, and okay, when you get in the car, don't just say, how was your day? Make your kids tell you what happened in the day. What was a good point? What'd you learn in this? And have this. So we are working on a parent education program as well.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. Where do you see all this, say, in 5 years?
My hope. Well, okay. I started the first day of school this week. I went to government class, was very excited when the teacher, I walked in and she was giving her presentation to the class on the first day of school, explaining Socratic reasoning and what they're going to be doing for the year. Warmed my heart.
Oh, wow.
Then I walked in, then I was just walking around and I walked into a Bible class and happened to be the seniors. And I said, okay, guys, I know I'm relatively new. We're getting this thing off the ground, but when you graduate, this is what I want you to be able to do. And it's what I just explained a little early in the podcast, that what you believe, and why you don't believe what the other person believes. And you're going to convince the other person that what you believe is right. And then you're going to be able to think this and reason through this. So for me, in 5 years, that would have given our 7th and 8th graders, they would have been in this program and been through that program for 5 years, and they will have that. Not just the concept, but they'll be able to live and breathe that when they walk out of here. And that diploma is not just, hey, I did some academics, but I can reason with the best of them. I can debate you, and I know why I believe what I believe. So for me, that's the culmination of why the Lord has put me in this chair.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we at Veritas Press, we are always wanting to help schools and homeschools, regardless of how much they want to buy into a classical pedagogy. We want to help them improve themselves. And so that's one of the reasons I was really interested in hearing your strategy, your approach, so that we can better avail ourselves to helping. And of course, we're always excited and interested to do as much as we can. We're not trying to tell everybody you have to do it the way we do it, but we want to be able to help people do it the way they want to do it that will help them. So it's interesting to hear you talk that way.
Well, I think the philosophy of the classical concept is catching on, because we understand as Christians what the students don't have currently, what they're not getting, because we just kind of gone along
in the last 3 years.
Yes, a lot of things have been opened up and eyes are opened. And so what you can provide for a school like mine is are these are these curriculum that's based on these concepts
Yeah.
that we can directly apply immediately without having to go to training, in order to get to it.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited for this, to just see where this is all going.
Yeah. What would you like to say to your peers within the ACSI community that you've learned as you've interacted with classical educators and Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point, and that sort of thing? How would you like to challenge them?
But we can't be complacent. Just because you have the label of a Christian school on the outside, when they come in, let's look from the parent. What do they think they're getting? What's their expectation when they drop their child off to you? What is a Christian education? Well, to me, Christian education is biblical worldview. So we have to really help these students understand, because they just don't believe what you say. They don't believe what you write anymore. This generation, they come from all different angles. They're complicated. So for them to have a stable platform of absolute truth is critical. And how's the best to get there? How's the best way to get a child to think for themselves instead of being told?
Yeah.
And we have to have critical thinkers like you talked about, but that they have to be rationalized and based on this absolute truth of the biblical concept. And then if we get those aligned, we're going to have phenomenal leaders that can push this country back to where it was originally intended to be.
Yeah.
I don't believe that, or I don't have, it's just a thought, but anyway.
Well, I would say that's probably what gets you up in the morning, the way
It
you're
is.
enthused about talking about it.
It is. It's exciting to me to see that we have that opportunity.
Well, it seems to me you have responded to God's call by saying, I'll stand right there, I'll do it. I will flunk retirement and come back into working, and you've done that, and it seems like you're doing a great job.
And we are. We have. It's been a retooling process for 2 years, and our team is so excited for this year. We have 3 pillars: academic excellence, biblical worldview, and community, Christ-centered community. And our goal is, when the kids graduate, they're going to be lifelong learners. They're going to be leaders and servants based on biblical concepts. So that's what we're about. And we have a buy-in, and it's just a great atmosphere and a great culture around here right now that is almost electric. I mean, you can just feel it about how excited everyone is.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. Well, Kris, thank you for joining us today. It's been great to have you.
It's been great. Thank you so much for allowing me to share the vision.
Very good. Folks, thanks again for joining us on another episode of Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. We hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.